a lot of the material that I have tonight I was presented then, so I tried to slim down the presentation so to not be redundant, and then to leave plenty of time for some questions, and then also to kind of focus on the Libbytown portion, which you'll see in a minute, as Winston suggested. So, but just a little bit of context. As many of you know, I'm sure the city's been working over the years on planning and constructing a network of off-street pathways that ultimately someday will encircle most of, if not all, the peninsula, sometimes referred to as a circumpeninsula loop or pathway. And tonight we're focusing on two projects that are going to span a gap in that network between the Bayside Trail and the Four River Parkway Trail. And those two projects are the Union Branch Pathway and then what we're kind of calling this Libbytown connection. So the Union Branch is still kind of at about 60% design, working towards final design. And the Libbytown connection, which would connect from where the Union Branch ends at Park Avenue to the, oh, I don't have my laser pointer on, to the Four River Parkway. That one is still kind of in the alignment selection phase. And I'll just note these projects kind of overlap with a couple other projects that are going on. There's the city and DOT are partnering on the redesign and ultimate reconstruction of the intersection of Forest Ave, State Street, Marginal Way. We were hoping that was going to be already underway, but that's been a little bit slow to get started. And then many of you are hopefully familiar with the Libbytown Safety and Access Project, which we'll talk a little bit more about later and how that interacts with this project. So I'll start by going through the Union Branch pathway. And if you haven't had a chance to get down there in person yourself, this is what it looks like today. So 295 is on the left and Deering Oaks on the right. This picture is taken looking towards the east. And to give you a sense of what we're hoping to achieve, this visualization or rendering shows a 12-foot asphalt pathway. And to the right of that would be like a grass buffer, and in the buffer would be some pathway lighting fixtures. And then you'll notice the railroad tracks, the existing railroad tracks, we're actually proposing to keep those in place, but we'll fill the space in between the rails with stone dust to create kind of like a jogging surface, jogging path, to give you a sense of what that would look like. This is a rail trail in New Hampshire that Alex Marshall, the parks director, was aware of and had some experience with. So that kind of is what inspired us to do the same thing here. And then a couple other things I'll highlight. You can see in this before picture that there's fencing between the rail corridor and Deering Oaks. So all of that fencing would be removed. And of course, like the fencing associated with the basketball, tennis courts and whatnot would stay, but all the fencing between the pathway and the park would go. And the idea is to really make the pathway feel as, connected to and integrated with the park as possible. And then also more fencing. So in sections where the pathway is closest to 295, there'll be a fence between the pathway and 295, something like a 6 to 8 foot fence. And the decision was made to locate the fence on the property line, which puts it about 2 to 3 feet from the edge of the pathway. We had Well, I'll just say we're still working with DOT on some sort of landscape options for between the pathway and 295. I'll say one of the most consistent bits of feedback that we've gotten is that people are concerned that the noise from the highway is going to detract from, I mean, it already, it impacts the park. And, if you're playing tennis or whatnot, you can certainly hear the highway. And so the pathway is that much closer. And earlier in the project, we, looked at the possibility of some sort of sound barrier, but that would be, they're actually quite expensive. So at this point in time, there's not funding for that at this stage. So like I said, we're still kind of considering some options for plantings that would help at least provide some visual screening to the highway, which can kind of improve like the perception of the noise, but certainly not as good as like a full-on sound barrier would be. And this is the section, so this is the part, if you were at the meeting in September, we went through the corridor and highlighted all of the different connections between the pathway and the park and Fitzpatrick and Hadlock. In the interest of time, I just was gonna kind of highlight the fact that the pathway starting at State Street is going to there'll be formal connections between the pathway. And what I mean by formal connections is there'll either be stairs and or like a ramp, which is intended to be accessible or in some cases bikeable. So there'll be the formal connections at along the pathway. So first would be near the tennis courts, and then one down to the volleyball court, another one to Deering Avenue, one that would kind of put you between Fitzpatrick and Hadlock. And that one would be like when Fitzpatrick Stadium doesn't have a ticketed event, that one could be open, and that would actually allow you to get up to Park Avenue, or at least, into Fitzpatrick if that's where you were going. But during ticketed events, it looks like the city would probably have to close that because it's that's how they kind of control access to the stadium. And then connection to Park Avenue. And then there was also a question at the meeting about connection to Washburn Street, which is definitely a possibility. It probably just due to funding and some other considerations wouldn't necessarily get like formally constructed. At this stage, there's quite a bit of grade between the pathway and Washburn Street at that point. So that could kind of exist in a more informal way in the near term and then maybe get improved over time. So I'm happy to come back to any of these connections in particular if people are interested. But in the meantime, I just thought I would kind of give you the high level overview of where the path is going to connect. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight is we definitely understand that there's some concern about just that some of the segments, particularly along this section that I've highlighted with this rectangle here, there's some segments where people could feel kind of isolated. And just to give you a sense, like, you sort of near the park, I think there's a lot of good visibility between the park and the pathway, and the park is pretty active. But then as you get like behind Hadlock and behind Fitzpatrick, less so. So that's definitely one of the bigger challenges. At this stage, how we help mitigate that would be, providing lots of good lighting. There's been some discussion about incorporating some of those call boxes, but then also thinking of ways that the path could be a destination for activities. And some of those could include like adult exercise equipment, some playground equipment along the pathway, opportunities for like a graffiti wall similar to what's over behind the East End treatment plant, more formal kind of ground murals. And then another idea that's been kicked around is something like a linear skate park along that portion. That would be kind of potentially more of like a informal space, but with like some skate features and potentially some DIY stuff. But I should be clear, like none of this, the city's not committed to any of these ideas yet, and there's not really additional available budget for it. But we wanted to throw out some ideas, want to hear more ideas from folks. And if, something gains traction, at this stage, at least we can kind of, set the groundwork for it to be incorporated over time. And landscaping, I mentioned the section in particular between the pathway and the highway. And we're working on fleshing that out a little bit with DOT, but in, just broad brush, there's a lot of nice mature trees along that corridor actually, and we definitely want to preserve those and add more trees. And this corridor's kind of long been identified as having a lot of potential for, and there already are a lot of pollinator plantings, but even more. And then we have kind of like the low area around Deering Avenue. We've got some rain gardens planned, and the thought is similar to kind of the pollinator plantings, like low maintenance, more kind of natural look style. So like I said, the Union Branch is at about like 60% design now. We're hoping to have it finalized early this winter, and then out to bid early spring, so that construction could start next summer. Okay, so I figure I'll jump over to the Libbytown connection now. So like I said, the goal would be to connect the end of the Union Branch pathway at Park Avenue to the Four River Parkway trail. And we identified a number of different alignments, which I'll go through. But just in general, you can kind of think of them as spanning like two distinct segments. The first being from the end of the rail corridor to Congress Street, and then from Congress Street to the Four River Parkway. And all of them would use at least some portion of the facility, the two-way cycle track that will hopefully be constructed as part of the Libbytown Safety and Access Project. And so we'll take a closer look at that. So the first alignment that we looked at was extending from the end of the Union Branch to Congress Street along Valley Street. And so Valley Street today is, a two-lane, one-way street with parking. So the idea would be to consolidate to one travel lane and reallocate that space to provide a cycle track with a nice buffer from traffic. And pretty much preserve the existing sidewalk width. So this option, some additional benefits is that it would provide nice access to the hospital, and then eventually, something that might continue down Valley Street and serve that neighborhood and connect also to like West Commercial Street. But we've also looked at something that would make use of the railroad right of way. So that would cross the trestle bridge over Park Avenue and then continue along the right of way to Congress Street. The rail right of way is quite wide. There's really only and there's one track. There's two tracks that consolidate to one by the time you get over the bridge. So there's physically space for something like this, but it would require the cooperation of CSX, the railroad, because the railroad owns that right away. And so that's obviously far from guaranteed. And CSX only recently acquired Pan Am so the city, the state, and TSX are still kind of developing a working relationship. So that's basically going to be a long-term process to do something like this. But it's something that the city is definitely interested in working towards. And a couple advantages of this alignment, if it can ultimately happen, is you eliminate a grade crossing of Park Avenue, and you avoid a grade crossing of St. John Street. And then also it kind of stays high the whole way along. So Valley Street, you have you might be familiar. There's a good little hill at the end, so you kind of go up to go back down Congress Street. Whereas if we were able to do something along the rail right of way, you sort of stay high the whole way. So like I said, that those two alignments would span from the end of the Union Branch to Congress Street, and then connecting to the Four River Parkway would require continuing along some length of Congress Street. So take a quick look at that project, and which you may already be familiar with, but basically it would be restoring two-way travel on Congress Street, and then providing a raised two-way cycle track on the south side of Congress Street, as well as some other enhanced sidewalks and pedestrian crossings and streetscape improvements. So we'll take a look at the first option that would span from Congress Street to the Four River Parkway. And that would be along County Way. So this is like where the old Atlantic Hardwoods was, and then kind of there's like the CrossFit gym is here, and then the jail, of course, is back here. And so County Way today is like about 40 feet of pavement curb to curb. So similar to Valley Street would be, consolidating the space for vehicles and carving out space for a 12-foot multi-use pathway with a 6-foot buffer from from traffic. That cross section lines up with this spot, cross section C on County Way. And then so County Way continues like about halfway along this orange dotted line, and then there's kind of through this like wetland area, there is the cross section would be different. That's what we're showing down here. Section D, which would be kind of snaking a multi-use pathway along. You can kind of make out these wetlands down here, so along the southern edge of those wetlands. The second County Way option 2, would sort of follow the same alignment, but then instead of hugging the south side of those wetlands, it would sort of wiggle off and pass like above them and head towards Westfield Street, and then parallel to the access this is Bunker Brewing here, so that there's kind of if you're familiar, if you've ever walked back there, there's kind of like an existing drainage channel and a steep slope. So the pathway could be like tucked down at the bottom of that slope and preserve kind of the existing swale.
Tom, County Way
yeah.
goes to basically ends at a fence at the parking lot of Mercy. Can you show me where that is on the map?
Are you talking about like if you head past the jail, say?
Yeah.
Right. So these would peel off like before, how like the pavement sort of ends and then County Way kind of turns into like a gravel drive.
It's been a while, but I guess so, yeah. But where's Mercy on this?
Mercy's like down kind of off the off of this.
So then the County Way is that sort of continues that road there below the green dotted line. It kind of V's into it.
There's Mercy, right, on the other side of these train tracks. So
All right, go on with your presentation.
does that help though? No, I think this is helpful because those maps are kind of a little bit more zoomed out, and not everybody might be as familiar with the space back here. We can come back to it. So the other option that we looked at would continue along Congress Street farther, and then pass down Westfield Street, and similar deal to County Way and Valley Street, how we would consolidate down the space for cars and carve out some space for there's like an existing 5-foot sidewalk today, but we would provide an 11-foot multi-use path, and again a nice buffer from traffic. And then that would continue along and kind of follow the same alignment as County Way option 2 had between this area here and Bunker to connect to the Fore River Parkway path, kind of where that existing connection is behind Bunker today. And then finally, we considered something that would be more like a kind of neighborhood byway type connection along Frederick Street, that could be coupled with some traffic calming measures, such as speed tables, necktowns, chicanes, that kind of thing, and then connect to the Fore River Parkway. And there was, at the public meeting, there was some discussion about how that connection is a little awkward today with the couple right angles and the fence right there and stuff. So I think this project would be an opportunity to take another look at that and see if that could be cleaned up a little bit. So I won't get into like the full details. We did perform kind of a alignment evaluation that looked at connectivity, multimodal function and safety, user experience, and constructability. But basically, where we're at right now, as far as working towards selecting an alignment, basically, given what I said about how CSX owns this parcel here, and that's going to be require a good bit of coordination with them. In the nearer term, we'd be pursuing Valley Street as a connection, and so while still working towards a connection along the railroad property. And so ultimately, ideally, it'll end up kind of not being an either or, but both situation, because both have strong benefits and kind of do different things in a way. And then where we're sort of currently at with the connection between Congress Street and the Fore River Parkway is looking at Frederick Street sort of in the near term, again, while still pursuing some sort of connection that would go, either along County Way or Westfield Street. And I know that some of you may remember from the meeting, we talked a lot about how when the city acquired the Union Branch, also involved in that was the kind of arrangement with Maine DOT was acquisition of this parcel. So the city owns this parcel, and there's some other potential for that site to be developed. There was some preliminary investigations into how that site might be developed during as part of the due diligence for the land swap and ultimate purchase. But there's quite a bit of complexity. There's a lot of environmental issues that would have to get worked out, as well as the wetlands. So that's going to be, again, probably a longer term pursuit, just figuring out those issues and how they interact with the pathway. So anyway, I know that was a lot, very quickly. I'm happy to go back to anything, if anything wasn't clear, if you have questions.
Yeah, we've got if anyone wants to ask a question, use like a raise hand function if that exists in your version of Zoom. I'll go to Zach.
Okay, I have a few. Maybe I'll wait for one of them. But the stone dust trail, is that sort of both a way to preserve the track and to add a kind of aesthetic feature?
Yeah. So that brings up another point that I didn't really get into, but the tracks are actually eligible for inclusion on the National Historic Register. So eliminating them would actually not be so straightforward as just simply taking them out. And in addition to that, yeah, we thought that it would be a nice, kind of, I don't know, to retain them. There is, some historic interest, and it kind of provide it sort of would, I feel like it would function similar to the way the Eastern Promenade Trail does with the paved portion, and then a lot of that has a stone dust, like kind of by Fish Point there's like a stone dust option parallel, which is a nice surface for jogging, and it kind of creates more space overall.
Cool. And then I gather from your use of the passive tents, the decision was made to put the fence 2 to 3 feet. I mean, that's sort of maybe the only real disappointment, I would say. There's a lot of reasons to put the fence right up against their guardrail. I mean, would they even be able to mow with the fence right in the middle like that?
Right. Yeah. So yes, the 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 way that like access to the highway is controlled is, there's a lot of concern about who can get, onto the actual highway property, and so like the nature of that, is kind of what drove the decision for it to be on the property line itself. And so, yeah, there has been a lot of discussion about maintenance. Maine DOT would maintain, everything on their property on that side of the fence.
And then my last comment in part one is a sculpture park um in that dodgy bit.
Yeah. Are you volunteering, Zach?
Yeah, I know.
Good.
My hand is raised.
Let's talk.
All right. I've got a couple hands up. I'm going to try to hold us to like 7:45 here. So make it to the point. And I'll go to Jamie.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. I was curious about Washburn Street. Is there any separation in the line of control or access to Washburn? Are there any barriers to like physically connecting to that, or I guess more like politically connecting to Washburn? And I'm thinking if that's kind of outside of your scope, but there's no reason not to connect to it, that could be potentially a role for Portland Trails to play.
No, I think that's kind of what I was alluding to, and I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I think that one, would be a good, opportunity. I mean, I think that there'll have to probably be more coordination with like the residents of Washburn Street and that kind of thing. So that, some political considerations there, but no, other than that, I think it can happen, and I think it would be a good fit for, it's kind of like akin to, say, like the connection between the end, like near the treatment plant up to by the East End School there, something like that type of connection.
All right, I'll go to Steve.
Um, two comments. One about that Washburn. I believe at the meeting, somebody from Washburn Street brought it up and suggested it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's and if it was the only way out, I think it would be problematic. But because it's one of multiple ways in and out, that it wouldn't really cause much problems. My comment about the fence is that if you put a fence, I'm sorry, a barrier wall along the highway there, all you're going to do is bounce the sound across over to that other side of Washburn Avenue, and they're gonna just be blasted out of on sound. And so putting a barrier wall there would actually cause more problems than it would solve on the side. What really needs to be are the trees. High trees would be the way to solve that, because the sound would float into the trees and it would absorb as much sound as it could. So my only other question is about the timing of the determination of which alternative to use on the other piece. What is the timetable for deciding what exactly alternative you're going to go with?
I mean,
and by who? Who's going to make that final decision?
the project team, the city, and pending additional public input. I think, like I said, there's a lot of factors going into the use of that site at the end of County Way there that the city owns, like just the environmental remediation. There's a lot of big questions there.
I was actually more whether to go with Valley Street versus well, I guess that's all part of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like specifically like the section between Congress Street and the Fore River Parkway.
Well, yeah, they're really two different pieces of it.
Right.
I guess, hadn't thought about it. So.
I think the Libbytown Safety and Access Project is they should find out by early 2024, I think, is and we can follow up about that. But as far as like the timeline for figuring out whether the city will be successful in their grant application to get the Park Avenue and Congress Street portions built, and then that wouldn't be constructed until that would be at least a couple of years out after that to get for design and construction. So I think what I'm getting at is I think there's time to work these options out. And in the near term, if we've got Frederick Street as a connection, and so I guess what I'm getting at is it's not necessarily like a pressing, like we need to figure this out, today, what the best option is, but we've kind of identified some potential options and some challenges with using any given one and trade-offs. And so it'll be an ongoing process to determine which one of these is going to make the most sense ultimately. Sorry I can't be more kind of definitive
That's fine.
right now.
Yeah, no, that's
An honest answer is a good answer. I'll go to Alex.
Alex?
Alex, or we can do Liz first if you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I missed the other one, so I do have some commentary and questions about the Deering Oaks part.
Sure.
I'm very, very glad to hear that putting up a wall between the highway and the park is back on the table. It's something I suggested several years ago at a meeting, and about that particular part of the trail. And So I'm glad to hear that it's being looked at. And I would say the higher the better, frankly. Partly because it's also not just about that trail, it's about the entire Deering Oaks. You cannot go anywhere in Deering Oaks without hearing motor vehicles. You can't go anywhere. And a large part of that is from the freeway, I-295. So I would say that that's a really big critical thing, and I hope work continues to get done on that. Keeping as many access points, I think, is really important as well. And also the one where the trail winds then down to the parking lot at Park Ave.
Yes.
I was looking at the drawings for that, and it almost, I am very interested in whatever kind of separation there is between that parking lot and the end of the trail. Because I could see something where it would get snow on it. People would park there if there weren't barriers. Because I would be using that because that's very close to my house. So so I'd be very interested in that being very well, always accessible and always maintained as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess I'll start with that. The city is committed to maintaining the Union Branch in the same way that the Bayside Trail is maintained, so it would be plowed. That's another thought with the railroad tracks, by the way, being stone dust, is that they would be unplowed. So assuming we get snow, it could be nice to cross-country ski along there. But yeah, the connection between the parking lot, Alex, that I think originally we had been thinking there could be like a wooden guardrail, kind of similar to like the Boyd Street Trail between the pathway and the parking lot, but then decided that as long as there was like a good amount of space, so like the 12-foot asphalt pathway and then like another 4-foot kind of buffer space, that the guardrail wasn't strictly necessary. And it's also parallel parking along there, so along the pathway, so you don't really have the issue of cars' bumpers overhanging the space. If you can picture what I'm talking about. So we decided to not put like a vertical barrier between the parking lot and the pathway. And there's that kind of 4-foot buffer between the parking lot and the pathway would allow for some snow storage if necessary, while also, plenty of space remaining to be cleared of snow. Anything else? Did I miss?
Well, I think I do. You reconsider that because I do think it needs just more separation, because a 4-foot green anything is looked at some people by, oh look, a free parking spot. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you more about it too, if you want to reach out.
Thanks, Alex. Let's go to Liz.
Hey, thank you. So 2 thoughts. One is I would love to see mature trees in there, preferably between the multi-use path and the highway, but like wherever on both sides. I don't see a huge advantage to the stone dust between the rails. I'm not sure how much of an advantage that adds. And then my biggest thing was thinking about the sound of the highway. And I know some of us talk about in the future removing the highway, but honestly just slowing it down to be more like a arterial road speed would accomplish many of the goals that I think a lot of us have for highway removal. But in this case, the biggest thing would just be increasing the pleasantness and the quietness in the park. So I mean, if we went down to, I don't know if it's, I think it's like 55 miles, but people go 65 or 70. If it went down to like 35 miles an hour and then people were going 40, 45, like, and maybe if it was a little bit slower, some people wouldn't take it. and they'd go, and they wouldn't use it as a cut through and they take 95 instead. So I am curious to know if anyone, Tom, if you, I mean, and I understand anything with MDOT is hard, but I guess I'm sort of curious, is that an easier route to kind of downplaying the experience of having a highway going through our living spaces than actually like removing it a section, So those are my two thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah. I guess first I'll just say, I mean, some point this summer, I was like playing pickleball in the courts here, and there was something happened on the highway. I don't know if there was a crash or construction or what, but the whole highway was like bumper to bumper, and it was like astounding what a difference it made. Like it was like, the highway noise kind of like drowned out and you forget about it, but then like once it was gone, it was palpable, like how much more pleasant it was in there. So I definitely get it. The vegetation, like we are hoping to be able to include some trees in this space, and another option that's been discussed is having like that 6 to 8 foot fence be planted with something that would actually climb and create kind of like a visual screen. I know like if you read into it, there's a lot of sources that say that vegetation, unless it's like a really, wide buffer of dense planting, doesn't actually reduce like the decibel level. But I definitely think if like I've stood on both sides of the fence, like along the area where like the football field is, and there's like some taller evergreen trees there and like some cedars, and before they mowed, there was a lot of other plants, and I definitely felt like it made a difference. So we are working with DOT now on what we're going to be able to do for a planting plan here, and so hopefully we'll have more of an update on that soon. And then about the speeds, I mean, what's that?
Yeah, you're doing it. I was just gonna ask, how would we go about pursuing the speed issue?
I don't know. That's a big question. I mean, like you said, it's difficult, and it's the interstate, so it's like there's all kinds of stuff involved with that, and the design of it. The design of it is obviously, an interstate highway design, so simply signing it for lower, how well that would even work. I don't know. With it, like we should talk about that more, but I'd have to give that some thought.
Zach, maybe that we could add that to the list when we talked about the 295 event for the spring, like if there's alternative medium ways of just slowing it down versus like removal. Also I wanted to say that Tom, just the cross sections of like the streets near Congress and stuff, they're super exciting. It's so great to see those cross sections. Are the cross sections for Park Ave gonna look something like the Congress Street cross sections?
Park Ave is a little bit different, where like that design currently shows a still like separated bicycle infrastructure, but it's 2 one-way facilities, whereas Congress Street is like a single 2-way cycle track. Park Ave is right now the design includes a bike lane on each side for each direction.
But each of them, in terms of the travel lanes, do they both squeeze down to 22 feet, like 2 11-foot travel lanes?
They should, yeah. It should end up being something similar, yeah.
I'm not sure why Congress Street needs parking. I guess I don't know if this is part of your project, but if I'm picturing the section between St. John's and Denny's, there's not like a lot of businesses along there, and I'm wondering why they chose to put parking there.
It's a
I know there's one church there, but it seems like I don't know if Zach, do you think people are gonna park on Congress Street, or is it just gonna end up widening the travel lanes inadvertently?
Sorry, Congressman where?
So
Well-
Congress Street by Huntress, if there's if there's one way travel lane each way, and then there's a parking lane, does it even make sense to have parking in the right of way on that section of Congress? I guess if you're
I mean-
moving a U-Haul truck.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, there is parking for that one block. I'm, I mean, if you make it, they will park.
we should be encouraging parking everywhere. It is a well-known speed whatever.
Yeah.
Right, but given the choice, if you could get rid of that parking lane and put that large tree right next to the travel lane, if there weren't businesses crying out for how desperately they need the parking, which I don't think there are on that stretch, you could just actually have a real esplanade or like a much more green right of way. That's what I'm saying. Because that doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a
Yeah,
high demand.
this is
place for parking.
that's not part of this project, is it?
No,
no,
don't.
It's in front of us.
Yeah, I don't. It will connect to this project, but that's part of the Libbytown accessibility project that went out for the Reconnecting Communities grant. I hope as we get, if we get that grant, that there'll be like a little bit of opportunity to tweak details like this in that plan as we move forward. But that will happen another night, I think. But thanks for bringing that up, Liz, because that is a question. We see on Valley Street how the Parks Department is really aggressively going for that like 8 or 10 foot tree planting area. And so maybe they're getting braver about pushing for that. But okay. I think we're going to move on from this item as we have a lot of other things to cover. Might be a long meeting. But I did want to ask Tom, if people have further thoughts, questions, positive or negative feedback, what's the best way, who's the best place for them to email and share those with you or the city before these alignments are finalized?
Sure, you can either share them with me or Bruce Hyman, and I'll make sure that they get to the city. But I can share my email with you and Bruce's. I would imagine that many of you have Bruce's, but
yes, I'll make a quick I might pop them in the chat as if I get
I'll put it in
as
the
we
chat.
go forward, or you can.
Yep.
And then I also just wanted to mention 2 comments from the chat if you hadn't seen them.
I hadn't. No, sorry.
CJ just professes excitement for the Valley Street path and narrowing of the one-way section of Valley Street as he lives nearby. And then Eloise asks about bike parking along the trail. I'm not sure
Yes, definitely.
part of
Thank
the
you.
trail,
Thank you. Yes, bike parking. Let's see. I don't think. Oh, I am still sharing. Bike parking. We do have planned at. Well, I won't go there, but yeah, each one of those. I think most of those connections we do have bike racks in the design to be included. So definitely. I don't know why I can't get rid of it. If everyone can see my meeting chat, I'm not sure why I can't get rid of it. But oh wait, there we go. Yeah, bike parking here, not at Deering, but these 2 locations in the park. And yeah, it do have a good number of bike racks.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank
you
you
for
so
that.
much,
You're welcome.
Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, we'll get some emails in the chat. And I've always had good luck talking to Bruce. Yeah, it's really exciting to see this moving forward. And it would be great to see, we'll have to talk about how we can help secure funding for it or those options as we go forward. It would be great to see this come to life sort of on the same timeline as the Libbytown project if we get that grant. All right.